Rule 42. All persons more than a mile high must leave the court immediately.
1, 2, 3, 42.
Today's rule is rule number 35. When we expand our circle of love, we become better.
Hi, Anna. I'm Audrey. Welcome to Rule 42.
I'm Jen. Very nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Thank you so much. I get to hang out with these very cool women. I love it.
We love the power going on right now, and we're going to run with that. And I want to know all about you, because I actually have some questions for you based off of like other people that I know that have kind of been in your situation. We are all of different ethnicities here. And so we already know that that's a struggle in and of itself when you're growing up somewhere that's not typically accustomed to maybe whatever your nationality is. I grew up down south. They used to ask me if they could see my green card. I'm Puerto Rican. But I was what you would see. Like I wasn't the norm that you would see down there. You were either black or white. There was no in between. So you were adopted.
I was adopted. And then I was adopted from the Holt International Adoption Agency. Lots of people know about that agency. And at the time in the 70s or 80s, this was a time when there were a lot of adoptees coming from South Korea. And so my parents were in Colorado. My maiden name is Soderberg, which is very Norwegian. And then they named me Anna Soderberg. And then when you see me, they're like, Anna Soderberg. And then I raise my hand and like, really? I'm like, yes, that is my name. And so they adopted me from Korea, and my mom was told that she never could have biological children of her own. And so she decided to adopt both my mom and dad. And so they got me. My mom said, well, we wanted a boy. And I'm like, well, you're lucky you got a girl. There you go. And I grew up in Iowa. Well, that is a very homogenous country.
Just so that we can go back, for those that aren't familiar with the program, most of the children in that adoption agency are female, are they not?
A lot of them are, yes. But some are, I find more, especially in China, because of the one child rule, and also because, I feel like that I was adopted out of Korea. One, I hate kimchi. I'm never going to eat that.
I'm not a fan either. I get it.
It's just like, and it's fermented cabbage. Like, oh God. I'd rather eat a McDonald's burger or whatever. That's terrible. That's another story. But I think that a lot of girls too, so as females, I think I was adopted out of Korea because I'm a bit sassy. If someone tells me like a woman should be barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen, I'm going to be like, I don't think so. Well, I think that's part of the reason why I was adopted to the state. I was an infant. So I was only in Korea for a couple months with the foster mom. And so when people say, do you know how to speak Korean? I'm like, well, I was only there for the first 2 months of my life. I really can't speak the language, but I know a little Spanish. Donde está el baño? But that is one of the things people always assume, that either I speak some other language than Spanish or English.
People assume a lot, I feel like, just by looking at you, and they don't realize, because I get that a lot, where people always talk to me in English, like even when I'm in Spanish speaking countries, and I'm 100% Spanish, but I don't look like the typical Spanish person. So they always talk to me in English. Even when I tell them I could speak Spanish, they still talk to me in English. So I'm like, okay.
And then I look 100% Spanish and do not speak fluent Spanish. We've literally been together where I'm like, ella puede hablar contigo. And then they look at her and they go, how you doing?
I'm like,
yeah. It's so interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
And sometimes when I was younger, I would use my appearance to fool people. One of my stories is that in college, when I moved in with my roommates, we walked around the campus and pretended I just got here and pretended that I couldn't speak English. And so people would scream at me. They would say, Anna, this is a euro, lamb, bah, and they're screaming at me. What was really funny is that there was a young man that was in my Shakespeare class. So the next morning, I got asked by the faculty member, the professor, a question, and I answered it. And he was like, what? I said, I learn English really fast.
Just in that whole like classroom, I was just bringing it all in. The English came right out of me. That's awesome.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important, and I've learned to have a sense of humor about the way that people approach you, because I can either be offended. Now, if I'm hangry, people ask me, what are you? Or they scream at me because they think that I don't understand English. I will answer in a much different way. But if I'm, in a good mindset, I'll understand they're trying to connect with me. They're not trying to cause harm, and try to understand, okay, I'm going to meet you where you are and have a good sense of humor and be kind about it. But other times it's because it can be hurtful and offensive at the same time. And I'm sure both of you understand that you two seem to approach it with a good sense of humor and understand, but some days it's like, wow, you are stupid.
Yeah. All right. We have a saying, it's always important to be nice to people, but we also realize that common sense is not so common.
Yeah.
Oh, I like that.
Due consideration when we communicate with the outside world. Also, with your adoption, so you know nothing. Did you ever look for your birth parents?
So that's a really good question. I always said I was never interested in finding my birth parents because the story that I was told was that I was left in the box in the path of a social worker with a note that said, take care of my little girl as I cannot. And so for me, when I was told that story, it provided closure for me because I'm like, I don't need to find my biological family. I also grew up in a Catholic family with the two very strong-willed human beings. My mom is a Catholic. My dad is a atheist or agnostic. So those two very different opinions created very strong presence in my life. So I thought, I don't need any more parental figures in my life. And then when my parents got divorced and we have step parents, I'm like, yeah, I don't need any more parents telling me what to do. My dad. That's enough. I'm totally good. And I really accepted that it was this case, is that I was abandoned and rejected because it was from a place of love. Now, since doing the podcast, I've learned that those stories may not be true, that they're actually college students that were hired to write origin stories to give adoptees closure. And so I don't know what my story is in this process, doing this adoption and foster care stories podcast for me. It's like, as I learn about other people's stories, it's forcing me to ask questions about my own story. And I still don't know if I want to find my biological family. I haven't done the 23andMe or any of those genetic tests because I'm not sure if I'm ready for that. Yeah. And also because I know my biological mother is Korean, but in my head, I believe that my biological father is Italian. And so...
Hey, Jen's biological or Pablo Escobar for...
Yeah. Oh my God. So I grew up not knowing my dad for the longest time. So yeah, we used to say he was Pablo Escobar, and like I don't know why. We were just
wanted all of the benefits that in.
Exactly. I love that so much because I'm like, imagine my Italian when I went to Italy, and I'm like, these are my people, it's my food. Yes, it's what those I imagine. Like, oh, you could be my papa. Is it? Say it.
Papa, can you hear me?
Exactly. I love Pablo Escobar though. That's awesome.
Yeah, that for the longest time I've been running.
When we actually found out who her father was, we got all excited because we were like, we're going to Ibiza, baby.
Yeah, so he's from Ibiza. I briefly have talked with him. It's an interesting road to navigate because like they just moved to North Carolina from New York, so now they're like really far from where I am, and we don't talk as much. But I was always curious when I was younger, kind of like who is this person? Am I like them? Because
From your story. Wait, do you know how she has her story about like being left on the doorstep with a note? Jen, say what happened to your dad.
so my mom and my dad were like dating. So I get my mom's side of the story, and then later down the road, I got his side of the story. So I never knew. My mom was very, very closed off, did not like talk about it or anything. The first time I heard about my dad was when my sister was actually sitting at a table with her boyfriend, and they were going through pictures, and there was this picture of this guy that I always saw, but I never knew who he was. It was just some guy like laying on a bed, all 70s, like, hey, like, no shirt on, and like, hey, dude on the bed. And I never knew who he was. And I just kind of, so she was just like, that's Jenny's dad, and like kept going, and I was like, huh, my dad? And I kind of like, and I didn't say anything. And then after a while, I asked my sister, and she was like, oh yeah, this is your dad. But she was like, I don't know, it was weird. Like, mom had me call this guy, and the person who answered the phone said he died in like a motorcycle accident, and he's dead. And so I was just like, okay, so I guess my dad is dead. So like that was it. But then throughout my years growing up, I kind of just always kept looking, and kind of, like, I don't know. There was always that thing like, who am I? Like that part of me, am I like him and stuff? Am I not?
What, like,
Yeah. So
another.
yeah. So I kept looking, and then eventually I found people with the same last name on Facebook. So I just started messaging all of them, being like, hey, you might be my dad. I'm not sure. If you're not, like, I am so sorry for bothering you. Forget that. But but I was like, I did 23andMe and Ancestry. So I'm like, go on there. Like, if we're connected, great. If we're not, I'm so sorry. So sorry. And so it took a few years, but then eventually a lady wrote back, and she was just like, yeah, I saw your message. Jim might be your dad, like blah, blah, blah. So they did the Ancestry, and it turned out he was. And then his side was that, he dated my mom very casually. And,
The mom's side.
She was in a full-on relationship. Like, that was her man. So I don't know. I mean, it is what it is, but it's just interesting to see, like, so I noticed there are some similarities between me and him. So it's just interesting. And I always wondered that, because I have kids, and their father passed away when they were really young. And I see so much of him in them, in their mannerisms and stuff like that. So I always wondered, like, do I have this guy's mannerisms too? Or do we like the same type of food or something, like it's so. Yeah.
So Jen, for you, like that who am I question and finding your biological father and the story and connections. So how has that changed you?
I feel like it gave me a little bit like of closure, like not just kind of like always wondering like, who am I now? I'm like, okay, well that guy's my dad. Like, I've tried to have more of a relationship with him. I've tried to kind of reach out. I've invited them over to my home, but I guess it's weird for them. I think
he had like a medical thing too.
Yeah, he had lost I don't know if it was a stroke or whatnot, but he had lost oxygen to his brain for like, so he's not completely the same as he was. So it was interesting that his wife said that sometimes when he talks to me, she can see the old Jim come back and like the talking and stuff. So it's pretty cool, but we don't talk that much. And now they moved away. So it's just kind of like, they're in North Carolina, I'm in Connecticut. So it's just kind of, and when you have kids and life and running around, it kind of is what it is.
But I think it's like knowing what I'm hearing from other stories. I just had someone on who found her biological family, and just resting and knowing the truth.
Yeah.
It's like, that whole thing about the truth will set you free, of just having that, where I think a lot of adoptees, we don't know the truth. I have no idea if that box story is actually true. Now I can go wild with my imagination and think, oh, my biological father is, Pablo Escobar, since that's no longer yours. I'm like, I'll use Pablo now.
Got some. I actually have a friend that doesn't know anything about any of her parents. She was adopted. She's done the ancestry. She tried reaching out to the agency. Because I think it was actually through a church. I don't remember her full she listens to us. Hi, Dad. But her whole other reason for looking for her biological parents was not, and she loved her family. She loved the people that raised her. She loved her parents. And the reason she was looking was all medical based.
Yeah.
She had kids. She herself, there's just so much medically she wanted to know, and had questions about, does this run in my family, or is there anything that I need to be conscientious of? Did you ever have those types of questions?
That's a great question. And then yesterday in that interview that I was talking about, the reason why she went for the search for her biological family were for medical reasons. So she had a child that had a medical issues, some health issues. And then when she was pregnant with her second child, her husband said, I know that because she didn't want to find her biological parents because her adoptive parents were her family, and that she didn't want to disrupt the bio parents' lives if they had not told anybody. But when the second child was coming, her husband said, you have a responsibility that if you can find access to medical information before our second child comes, you have an obligation to do so. Now, it worked out great. It's an amazing story. So she found her biological mom and then found out that they had lived in the same neighborhood, knew the same people, those kind of things. Now they vacation together and they just expanded that circle of love. Now that is a great, story that every adoptee hopes for. That's not always the case. There have been other stories of people that are adoptees who have searched for their biological family and either have found dead ends like your friend Deb, or they have found out that their biological family, they're a nightmare. And so then you've let open that Pandora's box where these individuals that they gave up their child for a reason. And then when you find out those reasons, that can be tough because then that question, Jen, that you asked, who am I, is tied to a bunch of dysfunction and tragedy and trauma. And so that's, I think, those things of prepping yourself before you find your biological family and you do that search to be prepared for whatever answers behind that door is important.
I feel like a lot of it is your perspective, though, too, because even though it is a bad situation, at least now, yeah, you were from those people, but at least that was the right decision to give you up and get you now in this awesome family.
That's a great point, Jen. I just want to jump in about my cousin in Germany who was looking for her mother when she became an adult, and she found her. And it turns out she lived 5 minutes away her whole life. She probably saw her in the store. The mother wanted nothing to do with her, and that was closure for her.
Yeah.
But I had a question from what you guys were saying earlier, and it was, I have this good friend who's adopted from Korea, and he always had a little bit of anger, I guess, and resentment. And he was adopted to a family in Boston. Now, it's a Korean guy, and his name was Kim O'Reilly. And, he'd get a little drunk, and his accent would come out. He'd be like, "Pak the cow," with it. And I'm like, whoa. But he wound up, he always struggled with his identity. And he wound up moving to Korea without speaking a word of Korean. And now he's been there for 12 years, and he lives there. And he's searching for himself, obviously. But and Jen, this probably happened to you too, do you guys struggle with your identity? How much of that is at your core, and how do you reconcile that?
I mean, that's a very interesting story. And I think that there are a lot of Korean adoptees that have gone to Korea and they don't know the language and they just immerse themselves to figure out who am I and to see people that look like them. So when you grow up in Iowa, there weren't many people that look like me. That hasn't been, I think identity questions have been always related to what Jen said. Who am I? And what have I've never wanted to talk about my adoption story until I came into this podcast opportunity. But I told a story a couple weeks ago about how when I was 13, I would wear sunglasses all the time. And my mom and family were like, "Oh, you think you're a movie star, because you're 13 and rebellious." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm so cool wearing sunglasses." But the truth is that I wore those sunglasses because I thought people wouldn't know that I was Asian. And so I thought it was a way of concealing who I was. And all the things that like were identifying factors that were spotlighting my differences, I would try to conceal. Now I generally hate kimchi, but I wouldn't wear like Mandarin collars. I wouldn't wear, I'd wear the sunglasses. I wouldn't want to go to Chinese restaurants for my birthday because I felt like it would make me, stand out and be different. And so all those things that were like really all that self-hatred, right? And so all those ways that I tried to deny those pieces that are me. And for 47 years, I did that. And so as I've been doing this podcast, it's like trying to figure out how do you fall in love with yourself, figure out the pieces that are really that I do like, I don't like, and then helping others be able to love the little pieces of myself that I can't change. I can with surgery, I guess, change the shape of my eyes, or I have been blonde before just because I see you cool people wearing tattoos too, or having tattoos. I tried to get a tattoo and then I broke out in hives for 3 weeks, so I didn't do that. It's so sad. So now I have to go use Inkbox and do like fake tattoos so that way I could be cool. But all those things related to identity of like figuring, and that's why I do the podcast and to be able to do it. And it's why I named the show the Anna Jinja Show, because I would not say my middle name for the longest time because people would say, "What is that?" And I'd have to say, "Well, it was the adoption agency gave me that name. I'm adopted from Korea, blah, blah, blah," kind of thing. And naming the show the Anna Jinja Show forces me to say every week my middle name and to like really own who I am and the pieces I don't want I don't want. I think it's so sad. I think, for 47 years, I denied talking about or questioning or trying to conceal who I am. So I don't know if Jen, if you felt that way, but
Oh yeah,
I totally just tattoos and stuff like that. So maybe it's a different story.
oh no, I totally rebelled, and yes, I did the tattoos. I did a lot, but I didn't let anyone know like that I didn't have a dad or any of that stuff. Like that wasn't something that I spoke about freely to people. No one knew that I didn't know who my dad was. I don't think some people still don't know. Because it's not something that I shared.
Surprise!
No, I mean, it is what it is. It's my story. I just, yeah, I kind of just I lived with my brother's dad growing up. I did not like him. He was not a nice person. But I kind of just went with my brother's story and kind of told everyone that I was from Peru. My mom's from Peru, and then his dad was from Spain, which actually worked out because my dad was also from Spain. So it just kind of, I wasn't lying, but I thought I was like the whole, so I would just be like, yeah, I'm Peruvian in Spanish. I'm Peruvian in Spanish. And it's just,
So I was actually adopted, but I know my biological parents. I was adopted older, so I was 9. And I was adopted by extended family members that I didn't know. So up until that, so I am Puerto Rican. I was born in New York, but we didn't stay there. My biological parents moved down to Georgia. So that's where the whole, people don't look like you and you're completely different from everyone else that's out there. When I first moved there, I was 2. So from New York to Georgia, I didn't speak English. And then it just got lost because I was down there until I was about 8. And then when my parents got divorced, I went from a family of 5 because I had 2 older brothers and then my parents. My mom moved back up north and a family member took me in. And then they adopted me and I stayed with them. And I remember I had trouble with it. And like the second year I was at church. So it's kind of funny. I was in a Catholic school and I had my aunt who she was religious, but she wasn't she was more spiritual than religious. And then my uncle, my dad, who was an atheist. And he would take me, I was in all sorts of things. I was in the church choir, all sorts. And he would take me every Wednesday and every Sunday to church. Wednesdays for my practice, Sunday for me to be up there. I never knew that he was atheist, ever. because he went and he did every part of it with me. But I would go to the priest, because they would tell you to do like confession and stuff. And I remember him saying something about me being angry and sad. And I was like, well, yeah, because my parents gave me away, like it, and I knew them. And he goes, well, you need to get over that, because if they loved you, they wouldn't have. And you need to be grateful for the fact that there were people that took you that do love you. So I tried to embrace that more. I did not. I rebelled like crazy, but I do love them. And I love the opportunities that they gave me. But it also brought me closer to my culture, because down in Georgia, there were no other people like me. The family stopped speaking Spanish. The only time they spoke Spanish was when they didn't want us to know what they were saying. And I move up north again, and I'm in this completely different world. I also never been to a private school, didn't understand the uniform thing. And my uncle was head of like the Spanish organization at the college that he taught at. And I was all of a sudden immersed in this like Spanish heritage, just completely immersed in it. They spoke Spanish at home. They made a bunch of Spanish different types of dishes that took hours. And it was that typical mom at home, dad out working. They had another nephew that they had adopted, but they'd had him since he was like 2. And so I had a brother, but it was interesting to finally be around people that looked like me. And that talked the way that I was supposed to speak. So the Spanish that I do know, I know because of them. And I know it well enough that people don't know that I don't speak Spanish because of the way that I speak it. But I understand what you're saying in terms of like not seeing yourself in the community around you and trying to hide it. I wouldn't tan, because everybody else was white or black. And I already came with melanin in me. So I would just not go out in the sun, because then that would make me darker. And then people started questioning me more on what I was. I wanted the blonde hair forever. Everyone that I was around was white, blonde haired, and blue eyed. So I just was not what you were supposed to be. So it's something that like I think that we all kind of experience, even without being adopted or belonging somewhere else. It could be something as simple as where you live. Like we moved up to Wilton from Westchester. So now I have 7 kids. So I was in Westchester, and it's a very Spanish heavy community. So it was just nice to be around a very Spanish heavy community for me. For me, it was nice because these are my people. And then I moved up north into Connecticut. And my first 3 days there, I was in a grocery store and I just started crying. And I am a grown ass woman with children crying. And it was because every single person that was around me was white. It was because I was getting the looks again. I was getting the kind of where they walk kind of around you to stay away from you because you're different and you look dangerous. Like, I'm not different, exotic. Oh, down in Georgia, it was like, oh, you're different, you're exotic, you're pretty. Up there, it was like, oh, I was a danger. My daughter got called a nigger. Like, so, and then we came down to Florida. I'm surrounded by Spanish people again. So, but it does impact a lot of how you feel about yourself and the way that you interact with the world.
Yeah. Well, my heart is like filled with a lot of emotion as I hear both of your stories. I did want to say, I think that for the person, the choir director who told you to just get over it, I think that when I talk about the truth, and so the truth is that yes, there is love in an adoption, and that my biological and my adoptive family, that there's love. But I think denying the fact that there is anger And then to be also to have like the grateful adoptee, that I have to be grateful for everything because of the way that I came into this world. I think that is utter bullshit, quite frankly. Because I think if you deny that you have every right, and your friend Kim has every right to be pissed off. You were at the very beginning of our lives as an adoptee has been rejection, abandonment. And so why would we not be pissed off about that? That doesn't deny the fact that there is love in our life and that there are acts of love that we are surrounded by. But when you deny that part of yourself and someone tries to like take that away from you, that does a disservice to who you are and who you're meant to be in this world, because then you feel guilty. You have to feel, I grew up Catholic, that Catholic guilt sticks with you no matter what. And so then you feel guilty for like not being grateful. So no one says to their biological children, you must be so grateful that you were born. Nobody says that. So why do we have to be grateful for our existence when we are here?
No, we say, I brought you into this world. I can take you out of it.
Make another one look just like you.
About your story, and then the thing about being the other, when you're in the grocery store, it breaks my heart because I think in this day and age, I think these are the times where we're going to have to like figure out how do we interact with each other and how do we ask questions that were from a place of curiosity, respect, and love rather than suspicion, hate, and fear. Because when we do that, we lose our opportunities to be able to connect with beautiful, wonderful, amazing human beings we are mothers, we are sisters, we are connected. We all, I say in the beginning of the podcast, we all experience adoption in some way or other. We adopt our values, our friends, our families, and connections. And when we adopt that and expand our circle of love, we become better. When we shrink it, we become little a-holes, right?
Yeah.
And I think we all have trauma. And so I have these wonderful, beautiful nieces that are, have had a tragic, terrible beginning of their stories. And I say to them, so guess what? You don't get to choose these things in your life. What you get to choose is how you react to it, how you respond to it, how you connect with others. When you feel pain, you can see another person's pain and say, I see you. How can I help? How can I bring my best self to this situation, to this relationship? And I think this conversation is so important because when I think about what's next, no matter how you voted, I think we have got to figure out how to shrink that divide, all those things that divide us. And you may not like me. You may think that I'm stupid. You may think that I'm a procrastinator. You may think, wow, look at her with the stupid hives because she can't get a tattoo. What a loser. But we can start with, you are here in this earth. We are here together. I respect you. I see you. And then you don't have to hang out with me. You don't have to go and have a beer with me or whatever it is. But you can at least say, thank you for being part of this world and move on.
Exactly.
It's sort of like Bumble. I like you. I think you're all right. You're just not my person. Move on.
Yeah. Well, like I tell my kids all the time, you don't have to be best friends with everyone. Like you don't have to even like everyone, but just be nice.
Yes.
Or just don't say anything at all and keep it moving. Like so easy.
Also, what's Bumble?
Oh, it's a dating app.
Not fun.
I'm married like 20 years. I don't know what any of that stuff.
Bad.
So when my sister was when she was in the dating, so I didn't know what Bumble or Hinge or some of the others, and so
There's so many of them too.
a lot. And so she was like going through and like showing me how it worked, kind of thing, and the swiping. I'm like, ooh, what happens if you swipe the wrong way? Yeah, swipes. Oh, wrong one. I might swipe the other way. But I have a friend who's like looking for somebody and is on Hinge right now. And this person put on all caps, first of all, about how he wants to not be lonely anymore. He has a broken car, but he has a house that needs some work.
Honest, yeah, definitely.
And my friend was like, look at this. This is why people choose to be single, because this is what's out. But I was like, oh, that poor man who is so lonely. And so I'm like, let's acknowledge and like hope that he finds his direction.
There's someone for everyone.
So anyone out there who likes all caps and is okay with a broken car and a house that needs a lot of work,
They can work on it together. See, that instead of saying a house that needs work, it's a house we can make our own.
well, I love that.
He just needs that extra love. Looking for a woman's touch.
I think he is. I definitely think he is.
There are ways in one.
I do think it's a good way to think about, like, if we're swiping in real life, right? So it's just that's not the person for me to hang out with, but I wish them well. Great, great all caps guy.
My
I'm rooting for him.
Yeah,
my adopted mom, she's passed, but growing up, she would always tell me that this is your life. These are the choices. When you make choices, the choices are impacting you. And unfortunately, sometimes, depending on the direction you want your life to go, so essentially, if you don't want toxic people in your life and stuff like that, you have to make the choice to bring the right people around you. So she had a very, very tight-knit circle of people, and she was a very family-oriented person, so we have a huge family. But her tight-knit people were all people she chose. And I remember her telling me sometimes, unfortunately, it means letting go of the people that you are related to in order to find that peace within yourself. So I have had to take my circle and condense it. And I have a very tight, small circle. And I thank her every day for teaching me that, because it's so important, the people you have around you, because I'm like a very empathetic person. So when people come around me and they're all about, like, they have so many feels, it just drains me. So I've surrounded myself with people that are just, they see the joy in life, they see the beauty, they see the pain, but they don't let it suffocate them. They know how to enjoy the small things. And these are the people that I chose to have in my life. And it's important. They build me, we build each other, we make each other laugh, and we chose each other. And I think those are some of the most valuable relationships. And now I look at their decision to take me in as, yeah, it was something of love. I mean, I found out as an adult later that it was a choice between me and one of my brothers, and they were fighting. And my aunt, who is my mom, who I actually grew up thinking that she did not like me. I didn't know that she was the reason I was there, because she chose me. So yeah. And I found that out after she died. But so I feel very lucky to have been raised by them, because yeah, I do know my biological parents, but I also know what they're like, and I know the ones that took me in, and I know what they're like, and I am able to model my family after the positive things that I was shown growing up by being taken in by them. So, and now I get to choose this awesome circle of people. These two are in my circle.
Yeah, I love my family, and most of my family is people that I've chosen to be in it. And those are the people who are always there. I'm in their kids' lives. I'm their aunt. We're all like, but we're not blood related. But, I feel like the family that you choose sometimes is better than the family that you actually have.
Then you're given.
Yeah.
Anna, can I ask you a question about your situation? Because my mother was not adopted, but her older brother was. And I know your family, after they adopted you, they had siblings also, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Wait, kids?
What's that?
They had children? Like biological children?
Yep.
Out of here.
Well, sometimes they say after you stop trying is when you can have the kids.
Yes. So again, when you see family pictures of my siblings, like, there's no question that I'm adopted. I mean, they're like about 6 inches taller than I am, so that the family pictures, and there's Anna, but I established dominance in this part. I'm so glad that I was adopted first, so I could say I'm the older sister, took him down a couple times, and then, established dominance, that I am the older one.
but you can also be the reason that they came around. Like, that is amazing because you fulfilled something in them that allowed it to happen naturally. That's a gift in and of itself.
Yeah, it happens a lot for families. But Tom, are you going to ask about?
Yeah, so my uncle was adopted from Canada. My grandparents couldn't have kids, and then my mother was born biologically a few years later, and my experience and my mother's experience, her whole life, they put him on a pedestal and treated her like crap, which was really odd. They lived with him, they moved to Florida with him, they stayed with my uncle, and she was kind of awful to my mom, and it was always really weird to us. It was a difficult pregnancy when she had my mother, apparently, but I just don't know if that's probably an outlier to the stories, right? Because generally, you're just happy to have this family and have kids when you thought you couldn't have kids. But I wonder if you had any experience with people you've interviewed, like why that would happen.
Yeah. Well, I think that that is not the typical story that I hear, but I also think that families are complicated, right? So lots of times I'll hear, "Oh, my brother's the favorite," kind of thing, and so some of it's trying to figure out, like, okay, so is that a natural thing that happens because of just the family dynamics, or is it because of something else? Now, I have talked in the book that I wrote, the novel that I wrote, that fictionalized true things that happened to me to protect those painful incidents. One of them was that an adopted mom had just had it with her children, and she confessed to me that she felt differently towards her adopted children than her biological children. And she said there's a primal connection to her biological children that she did not feel towards her adopted children. And that was the first time anyone had spoken a truth like that to me, and it was like mind-blowing for me, because I think, and again, when it comes to love, I don't think that there's like a finite amount and limited amount, but I also think that there's different ways of loving your son, from your daughter, from your oldest to your youngest. And when we deny those truths, I think that people can feel it at a cellular level. So it sounds like in this case, it was very overt. Like there was like evidence that the adopted child was put on a pedestal and treated in a different way. And I don't know why that is, like, where I think of just, hear that all the time, just about in regular, not regular families, but children that are just part of a biological family. I do think that we need to talk about those things, though, and be able to put out the truth about what is it like to be, how do parents feel about their children if they're being really honest, and how do we communicate that?
I feel like the kids, though, sometimes have their own views. Because if you talk to mine, the boys will all say that my daughter is the favorite. But then my daughter will look around and she'll be like, no, the youngest is the favorite. And, I do everything for him. So it depends on who you talk to, I think, too.
So I literally just had this argument or conversation, I guess, you would say, with someone. So again, I have 7 kids. One is my stepson. He is my oldest. I was with his father for 12 years. I saw him grow up. I love him. I don't see him any differently than any of my other children. And then I do have a 13-year-old that I do not see. He is being raised by his father and their grandparents, and the relationship that I have with him is very different. And people can judge me for that. And it's not that I don't love him. I love him. I had him. It's not the same. It's just not. I missed so many moments by them raising him that talking to him is like talking to a stranger for me. And you see it. So, and then, people have, well, Aubrey's your favorite. Well, yeah, she is. But there's reasons behind that. It's not just because I went randomly, and it doesn't detract from the love that I have for the rest of my kids. I love all of my children, and I would lay my life down for every single one of them. But my relationship with each one is completely different. And yes, it is very obvious that Aubrey is my favorite. But Aubrey is also just like me. Aubrey does not have a father. Aubrey is one of the sweetest souls with one of the greatest minds, and she has so many of the issues that I have that are just like they're mental and like stuff that you just end up passing down by accident. But the way that she's managed to handle it and her bravery, and because she is so much me, like who I was at her age. Like, no, we didn't respond the same way, but it's because she's braver than I would ever have been. And it doesn't detract from the love that I have for the rest of them. I do have a favorite. Sorry. But I'll do things with the other ones.
Yeah, I so appreciate you speaking the truth. And for, for Tom, that I'm glad that you brought this up too, because I think the responsibility somewhat comes to, like what I was telling my nieces with me, to think about, so the truth is, I'm not going to deny it, that the way that I was treated was different than my brother. And then how am I going to react to it, and what am I going to do with that information and in that experience? Because you can't change that experience. And so those that feel that, either as an adoptee or a biological child, I just say, just recognize that truth. That is the truth. I am treated differently. I was treated differently. It is different. That doesn't mean that their love is any more or less or whatever. It might be the same, but it's different. And I think then, well, how do we take that information to be able to be more loving and more kind? Or you can be pissed off. You can do that. And you can totally, that is your decision to be able to be like, you know what? I'm pissed off about it. I'm going to go do some karate and punch some walls. Okay. As long as you're not harming another person, I would say. But I so appreciate, Audrey, you speaking that truth, because your children feel it. They know it. But they can feel secure in that. That doesn't mean that you're not loved. You are definitely loved.
Well, but whatever, it is what it is. I talk to my kids like they're grown-ups. My kids have literally said, Aubrey's your favorite. And I go, yes, but do you understand why? Like, there's a story behind that. Like, and I will sit there and discuss it with them. They just all have such different personalities, and we're human. We have feelings too. We're not just mothers. We're not just you get stuck in this pigeonhole of a mother is a title. It is not who I am. It does not define all of me. So yes, I am human, and I love different people different ways. I don't like being touched. I have a boyfriend right now. My kids are, some of them, it's very blatant. Like, if they see him around me, they're jealous because I don't like being touched. I had a lot of sexual trauma growing up. I don't like people touching me. But I love when he touches me. So having him around me, having him hold me, I won't let him, I'll let him. My kids will come up and hug me, and I will hug them, but you can tell I just want, I'm doing it for their sake. I want to let go. And I'll literally get to the point where I start shaking, and they'll be like, okay, mom's done. And they let go. And it's not it's just something that's in my mind over things that have happened to me. It doesn't mean that I don't love them. It doesn't mean that affection for me is very hard. Physical affection for me is very hard. And again, we're human. So I acknowledge that my children are jealous of the connection, but I've also communicated with them why I'm like that, hoping that they understand that it's not them, and it's not that I don't love them, and it's not that I love someone else that more than I would ever love them. I will always choose them. It's just that we're human. We get to have human emotions and respond to things like everyone else does. Like, do you feel like people judge you based off of all right, well, you're from a Korean background, raised in a white household? Do people look at you and go, all right, well, how does it feel knowing the white privilege? Like that thing? Do you ever get that type of?
Yeah, certainly. And I think what you just expressed, which was so vulnerable and honest. And so I just want to take a second to honor that. And I think for the beginning of our conversation about the assumptions that are made based on your looks and what people think and the input that they receive. And I think that from this podcast and from this conversation, it is that we are all different. And so how do we learn in each person's story to say, Audrey doesn't want to be touched. The way that she needs to be loved is a conversation and connection and this or that kind of thing. For Jen, it is that she can speak Spanish. And so you can ask her questions and she's probably going to kick it when it comes to Duolingo and to help you be able to speak Spanish and to navigate your way through there. And that she she tells the truth, even though she might not know the truth, that her dad is Spanish. It is a truth of the way that she experiences it. And Tom will come and talk and he's organized. I'm like, wow, I love the follow-up and the way that he asks great questions. And so he's got like this amazing story connected to his family. And so getting to know people on an individual basis for what they need, I think that's the starting point. And just instead of like just grouping it like, this is how I assume all people that look like this are going to be this, you can start there and then narrow it down to say, so Audrey, Jen, Tom, how can I help you? What do I need to know to be able about you, to be able to love you and to be able to connect you?
That's true, but a lot of people are not vulnerable enough to expose themselves in that way.
Yeah, or they don't know how. So we're telling you today how. So ask. So ask questions to be able to say, so tell me about your story. Oh, so you know Spanish, but you're blonde. Huh, how does that work? And you can ask those questions in a respectful way. And what I'll say as a person of color and the minority and the marginalized population is that I'm going to do my best to be able to bring my best self to the situation. So when you ask questions that are on the edge for me that like either trigger me or this or that, I'm going to step back and go be in a place of curiosity to say, so why is this person asking me? And how can I have you ask a question that is respectful and kind that we can connect? Because I mess up. I'm still trying to figure out pronouns. I'm 52, so I'm like, and so when someone corrects me, because I mess up always, I appreciate when someone is kind to me and say, so Anna, if you want to get to know me, these are my pronouns and this is why. And so I try to connect it to the story with the person to be able like, I want to be able to get to know you. And I'm sorry that I keep effing up. I did it again the other day. I'm like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
No, well, that's a big thing that people with ADHD deal with. So we're so in our head and always like overthinking everything. So we over explain a lot because we want people to understand where our response or reaction is coming from. And it's not just like, it's like, oh, well, okay, I get how that just made you feel, but understand. And then all of a sudden we're going into a backstory on how we ended up getting to the point where we experience things and would have a different reaction than what I was expecting by communicating what I just did. Like, we over process everything, so over explain everything. And this is just something that would happen commonly with people with ADHD. And people just look at them and they say, are you ever going to shut the fuck up?
Because I just asked for the time and you just told me how the watch is made.
Just so I know your story.
Yes. Yeah, but it goes in line with expressing who people are and why, instead of getting on the defensive, finding out, well, where is this coming from and who are you? So that maybe I can understand where you're coming from as opposed to just reacting.
Yeah, because we just make all these assumptions. Like if I came and just gave you a big hug, Audrey, and then you're like, I could feel the flinch. If I don't ask questions, I'm going to interpret it like, she thinks I don't have tattoos. She's like, not cool. She doesn't want a hug from me. She hates me. I'm just going to curl up in a fetal position and cry. And that is not the case. It's because I just need to step back. It's not always about me. It's like figuring out what is it that the person needs to be comfortable. So ask like, may I give you a hug? May I ask this question? Is that okay? Kind of thing. Because I think there's so much, like when you were talking about the sexual trauma of your past, that you think about is what is the statistic? Is it 1 in 3 women have some kind of sexual trauma in their stories? And you're walking around and we're like making assumptions about people that they're stronger than they are, that they're this or that. I'm not thinking about that. And then 1 in 3 women have experienced something like this. And so just to have a little bit of kindness and compassion and think about that. Those numbers translate to people's stories.
Well, that's what people don't realize. They don't realize that everybody has a story, and like it's not always just out there that everyone knows. So no one knows your past.
That's where the whole until you can walk a mile in someone else's shoes, you have nothing to say to them or about them.
Yeah.
That's there are no one to judge. People have their our last podcast, it was like a slaycation thing and people were killing each other on vacations. But it's like, again, you find out that there's a lot in the person's past. There are a lot of red flags there in terms of the murderers. And hey, look, finding out more about people might even save your life.
You never know.
Oh my goodness. We always just assume, we make these crazy assumptions based off of the way someone looks, the way someone talks, their accent, their speech, are they eloquent enough? Is the vocabulary they're using from my group, or have they never been educated before? Like, there are just so many different components that make all of us up. You don't know unless you ask, but you also have to be able to respond. People have to actually.
Yeah. Well, and I would just say the other thing is that, so one of the things that foster care organizations teach is strategic sharing. So also because when you've experienced trauma, sometimes the case is that you'll just say everything. And so really it is like having the knowledge to be able to know when is it appropriate to share, and that the person needs to earn their trust. Like, I don't know you, Audrey, I'm just learning about you. So I don't deserve to know everything that happened to you. And so it's like wading in a pool. You take those little steps and make sure, okay, am I okay? Am I okay? I'm okay. Because some people are not going to take your story and honor it and hold it sacred. Some people just aren't or are not going to be able to handle the truth. And so it's like making sure that strategic sharing and making sure that you're in a safe place to be able to share your story is also important.
Very much so. But again, with people being able to respond, because sometimes it could be something very simple and they just don't, they're protecting themselves, and it could be something very simple as, hey, so what's your profession, or what made you choose that profession? And they're just kind of like, not everyone's comfortable letting anyone into their lives. So yeah, again, we keep our circles small. We respect each other. We remember we're all human. We all have our own different stories. And I also have a question. You do a lot of nonprofit organizations. I know that Habitat for Humanity is one of them. Is the chapter that you have in Ohio?
So I worked for Dayton, Ohio Habitat for Humanity a while ago. I always call myself being habitized because during my spring break trip, I went to crappy Michigan to build homes, and my roommates went to South Padre Island. They came back with a tan. I came back with really smelly jeans and like terrible. But I was able to be able to help a family be able to have that wealth building asset, which is a home. And I have always, so this is my adopted family. When we misbehaved, my mom would take us to the Catholic social worker house and say, so you think you have it bad? So then that means that you need to go and like volunteer someplace, because that was our punishment. That was my mom's creative punishment.
I love that.
I do love that.
Yeah, it made us, and I remember seeing Father Grubels when I came back to Iowa 20 years later, and he remembered me, processing my trauma.
How much is what you do now in terms of like your volunteer work has to do with atonement?
Ooh, that's an interesting question. I think part of it is just the way that I'm wired, and that I love people's stories. I love helping. I think I love also just having a mission to be able to like guide my actions and my values and putting those into action. That's just how I'm wired. I think, though, it's interesting that you asked it because I had somebody who was on the show, a 17-year-old, who was an adoptee and said, I have to earn my place in this world because as an adoptee, I have to prove that I belong in this family. I belong on the football team or this or that. And I said, I want you to just take a step back and that you don't have to atone for anything that happened in your beginning of how you got here. You are worthy because you are here. You are a beautiful, wonderful human being, and we are lucky to have you in this world. And so for adoptees and those in the foster care system, the suicide rate is 25%. And the reason I think that is because no one says to them to be able to navigate, to say the truth, in that I feel angry, I feel hurt, I don't know what to do with that anger and hurt. Nobody will acknowledge that hurt and that pain of being an adoptee. That doesn't mean that other people don't experience pain and hurt and trauma. It just means acknowledge mine and acknowledge me. And then let's figure out then again that you are worthy, worthy, worthy. You don't have to earn your place in the world. And so, and I forgot, what was your question? Oh, atonement. Nonprofit work, I've always just loved it. And like with Habitat for Humanity, I mean, my dad would never let me use the power tools, but they're going to, as a volunteer, let this like 18-year-old use a power tool. I'm like, yeah, thank you.
That is awesome. So you learned how to actually do a lot of the physical.
Oh yeah, hang the drywall, be able to that's cool. Oh, wobble deck, all those kind of things. And then sometimes when we had too many volunteers, my boss would have me move dirt. I'm like, okay, happy to move dirt. I'll move it from here to there. Great, I'm doing something.
That is
But
incredible.
yeah, I think for all of us who out there who feel a little bit sorry for ourselves, I think my mom's advice was good. Go out there and volunteer and serve.
Mm-hmm.
No, and I love that you do that, and I commend you for that because, there's so many other things that people can do with the hours in their day, and we only get this one life to live. So the fact that you spend hours of your time traveling to make the lives of others better is amazing. And I thank you for that.
I thank you for all of you for what you're doing. So I saw your list of shows and they are intriguing. I saw the one that's I'm like, oh, community connection. And I'm like, oh, an art. All right. Creativity. And then I'm like, oh, a polyamorous kind of relationships and way in the world. I'm like, I'm going to have to check that one out. Interesting. So I'm sorry that mine is so boring. It's like,
You think boring at all.
how did you gain us some big, huge.
It's so real. It's so authentic. It's so something that a lot of people, I mean, it came up. Have you ever seen the movie Selena?
I have not, but I know based on the singer.
Yes.
Yes.
So if you ever get on a long trip on a plane or something, a train, a bus, I would recommend, because not that she has an adoptive story, but she has a story in terms of what it's like to be Spanish and not speak Spanish in the world. How for Americans, you're not American enough. And for Mexicans, she wasn't Mexican enough. And that whole dynamic and that existence, that storyline is in there, but it's something that's real. So this is not boring. This is something that so many people go through, whether they're adopted or not. Just even the cultural component of having the mixed cultures. And there are people that, I mean, my daughter woke up one year and decided she was going to be Jewish. She was not celebrating this would be Mia, not celebrating Christmas. She learned how to play dreidel, dreidel, dreidel. She started playing Torah and everything, wanted a gift each day. She just decided she was Jewish. She was 7. I don't know where it came from, but to each their own.
I love that curiosity. That's awesome.
No, that's normal. That's normal. I wanted to be Swedish when I was 9. I lied and said my grandparents were Swedish, so I get it. Good job, Mia.
It happens, but you bringing up something that, and I love that you're able to touch the lives of someone like the 17-year-old that maybe never would have gone through their whole life without being told that they don't need to prove that they're worthy. They are worthy just being there, being a team player, being a part of something, being a part of your community, and just having your hand out for each other when needed, that makes everyone worth something, regardless of what your backstory is or what culture you are.
Yeah, well, you beautiful humans are doing it. And I love the stories that you share. And I just hold you with the utmost amount of respect and just appreciation and admiration for what you're doing with this.
Oh,
And
thank you.
the same for you and your podcast that is amazing, which is called Anna Jinja.
Yeah. And I would love for you guys to be guests sometime. I love to be able to do that.
Oh, me would love that.
That would be great. Absolutely.
We have so many more conversations. I have so many more questions.
So many more directions to go in.
Flies by. I'm so sorry. We get so stuck in like what we have like a million other questions to ask you too, but then you start rolling into like the stories and you're just like, tell me more.
So, Anna, where can we find you if people want to find out more information about you or they want to contact you to maybe talk about their stories?
Yeah. So they can go to annajinjashow.com and all the previous episodes are listed on there, which is great. I didn't get a chance to talk about the novel that I wrote, which is interesting because I had somebody tell me while I was writing it that was a self-indulgent activity that generates nothing unless you make money from it, whatever, not with that person anymore. But wrote the book. It was based on my adopted lived experiences and processing a failed marriage as well. And so that book is called Adopting Grace, and you can get that on Amazon. And you can always reach out to me because I'm going to stalk you guys. You guys are my new BFFs. I'm going to fiddle my way to that circle.
We can't wait. And we can't wait to be on your show.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being with us. And welcome to Rule 42 and our Wacky Wednesdays because crazy always happens.
Always.
Thank you. Big hug. Big love.
1, 2, 3, 42.
Rule 42 is hosted by Audrey Cruz and Jen Burke. It is produced and edited by Tom Smith. The opening song is Rule 42 by Eddie Carr. Rule 42's artwork was created by Aubrey Cruz. And I'm your announcer, Molly Smith. Thank you for listening to Rule 42. We hope you enjoyed the show. New episodes premiere every Thursday on all podcast platforms. Please subscribe, share the show, and leave us a 5-star review on Apple.